Berklee College in Boston apologizes for allowing police officers to use their bathrooms during the protest. Of course they did. At progressive Berklee College, they don't flush crap. They promote it to high-paying positions in the school administration. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Mr. Henke, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're discussing a pathetic Boston college facing heat from the woke scolds after allowing police officers to use their restrooms on campus. This, as the school begs forgiveness from Black Lives Matter for their insensitive flush policies. Yes, you cannot make this up. And while this is ridiculous, and I mean what I said, they don't flush crap at this university. They make it diversity officers. They make it chancellors. True. Really, this is what it's come to. You're going to dehumanize police officers as humans, almost like the Nazis did to the Jews. We cannot accept their pee and their poo in our restrooms. It will defile the racial purity of our Black Lives Matter university. Really? Do you understand how petty and childish that is? It's bad enough to apologize for it, then to grovel at the feet of Black Lives Matter. I guess, that old statement, they think their shit doesn't smell. Apparently, that applies to Black Lives Matter people because, we can't have the cops befouling our beautiful campus with their basic human right to defecate and pee.
Well, remember when Starbucks got in all the trouble because they didn't let the two black men
exactly right.
who weren't purchasing anything. And that, everyone had to apologize for. But if you do it to the cops, then it's okay.
So
that's okay.
You allow loiterers who are not purchasing anything to use the facilities, or else we're going to burn this town down.
Yes.
You let cops who are standing protection over campuses like Berklee, and the fact that they got a tinkle in your little winkles is enough to burn that down.
Yes, it is.
You see the pattern here?
And this is specifically coming from the Berklee College of Music's public safety department. All of that right there says way too much money is given to these colleges, that the specific Berklee, which Berklee College in Boston isn't a big university. We're not talking
I'd
Berklee
never heard of it
right?
before this story.
That already is a small college, but their College of Music specifically has its own public safety department who is then apologizing on Facebook for allowing the Boston police to use the restrooms after these, peaceful protests.
We were trying to put as funny a spin on this as possible.
But
toilet humor, it always sells, right? It always sells. But having said that,
B-U-T-T. Okay.
This is a shocking dehumanization of people. This is you are treating police officers as if they are subhuman filth. You are I'm not projecting this. I'm not exaggerating this. This is exactly how fascist countries have worked, right? To dehumanize the other. Their basic bodily needs are somehow grotesque. To accommodate them in even the most basic primal needs of nature it fails some kind of weird purity test. What we've got here is a system now at places like Berklee College, all of our universities, where to be black is to be somehow a privileged race, is to be somehow a race, a master race. Where again, like you said, to not allow black loiterers to pee at Starbucks forces the entire country into riots and screaming and yelling, brings progressive corporate Starbucks to their knees. This, on the other hand, is cheered by the progressives. What you've got now, and the funny thing is, this new racial hierarchy is being projected primarily by liberal white professors. Liberal white professors have elevated minority status to some kind of DNA-driven superiority, while cops, and notice the thing, black cops, Hispanic cops, Asian cops are their own entity. Maybe, hey, they wear yellow gold badges, cops. Maybe you could turn them into yellow stars. And they have precinct numbers on their lapels. Maybe you could tattoo those numbers on their forearms. How about that? Never been done before, has it? Berklee College.
And the thing that when you read their Facebook post, how they say, it was a decision to allow them in, it was ours. They say it was not a formal decision, but an informal one made on the spot. Meaning the person, when you have a person face to face with you, an individual saying, I have to use the restroom, then use the restroom. But it wasn't a formal decision because we needed to put it through the grinder, that is the progressive jargon, and make it so, oh no, we did something wrong and we must apologize and grovel.
Think about that. That they're covering their butts. Yes. They're literally covering their asses by arguing there was no formal poo approval application. Rest assured, angry Black Lives Matter protest, if there was a formal fecal form submitted to us, we would have vetoed the feces, right? We would not allow disgusting cop feces to be expelled in our bathrooms. This is some poor security guard, doesn't carry a gun, he's not really woke. He let a couple cops into the bathroom. If we had known this was going to happen, we would have sent auxiliaries to keep the prairie dogging police from using our facilities.
No Charmin for them. Here's what the post continued. Allowing police officers into the space was in no way meant to undermine Berklee's support for Black Lives Matter. We understand that many members of our community feel betrayed. How did it affect them in the least? Okay. We are deeply sorry for the impact this had on our community and for perpetuating feelings of oppression, silencing, and marginalization.
Now you see how the left thinks. Bathrooms are not places of basic human necessity. They are spaces, which is why you got to let boys who
worship
think they're
sanctuaries.
Exactly. You got to let boys who think they're girls into them because they're just spaces. Nothing happens there. They're just spaces, right? They're big, vacuous, empty boxes. So everybody should be allowed to go. But that's the problem, right? They're not those things. They are places where people engage in an intimate and very oftentimes personally uncomfortable form of being human. And you won't let cops do it. Just good to know that you have a fecal form. We got to see if we can get a copy. Can we get a copy of the fecal form that formally allows people to poop or not to poop? To poop or not to poop?
1 ply or 2. And just so you know, if you say anything about cops, even if you're not a cop and you think, okay, it's okay for them to go to the bathroom, it's not, because you're going to get your job offer rescinded, especially at a university where Sonia Forte Duhé was offered a job as a dean for the Arizona State University's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication. It was supposed to begin on July 1, but that's rescinded because microaggressions. They're micro, but they're aggressions. Former students actually lodged complaints about what she said on Twitter that they perceived as being quite rude. And so all she did was say that some police officers were good. In the deleted tweet now, it says, for the family of George Floyd, the good police officers who keep us safe, my students, faculty, and staff, praying for peace on this hashtag Blackout Tuesday, when they all did the whole Black Square Blackout Tuesday. So she said, the good police officers. How dare she? Job gone.
Yeah, at my Dr. Duke anecdote time, we were hiring at the university I teach at a digital humanities person. Talk about
digital humanities.
It's another way to unmake literature and to try to make English relevant, right? We hired we were hiring a digital humanities person. The last thing in the world anybody needs for any reason.
Yes.
But I remember the 2 finalists, and I've heard this story. I wasn't at the very end at the meeting, but I've heard this from a number of faculty members. There were 2 candidates. One was boring, white, female, and predictably liberal. The other was actually a lesbian who was engaging and talented and very accomplished. The lesbian candidate was beloved by the students. Overwhelmingly, the students who had input, let's hire her, we love her. Very little support for the boring old white girl. Well, it turns out that during her job presentation, when she was giving a talk, she mentioned hoodies. She mentioned hoodies in making an example of something about a linguistic point she was making. Completely racially neutral, just mentioned them. Well, the former department chair, you and I know what we're talking about. Complete waste of space. The typical Karen. If you could think of an academic Karen, a Karen who's constantly screeching about liberal causes when she's not really all that liberal herself. That woman and another faculty member went after the lesbian because she failed to acknowledge how hoodie was a racially coded word for black student, right? And so their outrage drove this poor lesbian almost off campus, and we hired the other person who stayed a couple years and left. That's what goes on in college campuses. That's how you can be the most liberal, most alternatively sexual, you could be the most non-traditional person, but if they want to get rid of you for any reason, they will find it. And you know as well as I do, the person I'm talking about is completely hostile. You are going to pass. This is typical of most college former department chair. She's not now, but she has her litmus test. Doesn't matter how smart you are, doesn't matter how accomplished you are, doesn't matter how many books you wrote, doesn't matter how many teaching awards you've won. You're either on her program of radical racial sensitivity, or she'll either prohibit you from getting hired, or she will destroy you once you are.
Well, and it's because the woman who's a lesbian that puts her a notch above her. So, on the intersectional ladder here,
and the irony is that this former department chair teaches, she's white.
Yeah, of course.
But she teaches African-American lit.
Of course.
I can't tell you, over the last 5 years, I've had 6 or 7 African-American kids of various, some were major, some were not, complain to me that who is she lecturing me about my culture? And anytime I disagree with her, she immediately punishes me somehow for it. That's what happens with progressive people like this. It's not about anything other than justifying their own progressive white lady power.
It is. One of Duhay's former students, Whitney Woods, who is black, responded to that tweet, saying that some cops are good, calling the professor racist, of course. There is no way in HE double hockey sticks that Black Lives Matter to you. You are one of, if not the most racist human that I have ever encountered in a professional setting. And so Woods later claimed that Duhay, who was a former Loyola University New Orleans professor, told her that her hair was too messy for television. Okay, they are in journalism, mass communication. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest, I know it all too well, about how it is in terms of appearance in front of the television screen. So it is possible that her hair was way too messy.
Yes, but notice the point here. And this is the coming thing. Well, in this country over the last 10 years, we went from the idea that you had to have some decorum when you applied to a job.
Oh, not anymore.
People would cover their neck tattoos, right? And they would wear long sleeves, and all the piercings they would pull out of their lips and their tongue. Not anymore. In this brave new world, the grungier you look, the better your qualifications are.
And this past weekend, I was actually talking to a couple of my friends who are scientists, and they work in labs, and they said how now there are people coming in for job interviews, bright pink hair, tats down here, and in the lab setting, you can't have, rings or necklaces, and they would have to take all of that out, but you can't.
Boy,
say
is that
anything.
A discrimination lawsuit?
Yeah,
somebody brings COVID across the country because of a contaminated nose ring.
Yeah,
we were just terrified. Somebody unleashes anthrax across the country, but we didn't want to tell her to take out her lip ring. We thought we'd get a Title IX complaint. Bastards.
All right, it's one of our favorite universities, Cornell University. Have you ever heard of it? It has a distinguished professor of chemistry who is named David Collum. Now, he is proclaimed to be libertarian. He puts this out, and for a professor to actually come out and say anything than being like ultra-liberal lefty is pretty brave. So he's been a sought-after speaker on finance and the snowflake generation. And so for years, he's been targeted, and now the George Floyd protests, all this stuff going on. Collum actually made a comment, and a group of graduate students are organizing to get him fired. Their situation happened in Buffalo, New York, where a 75-year-old man was pushed by police in Buffalo. The man apparently stumbled back several steps, then fell directly backwards, slamming the back of his head on the pavement. Okay, this is the situation. And so, it's kind of like a smaller degree of what happened with George Floyd, but another instance of police brutality. Collum tweeted out that he says, one, that guy needed to give that cop space. Wasn't brutality. The guy was feeble. The cracked skull, which I agree was the likely event, was self-inflicted. And two, can you imagine how fried these cops are at this point? The guy got a nudge. The old guy had something in his hand, looked like maybe a taser. If I were a cop, my nerves would be raw. I'm tired of these riots. So he's basically commenting on what he saw in this specific instance. And within hours, they already had put up a campaign trying to get him fired.
It's one thing for mindless mobs to do it on Twitter. It's another thing when your professional colleagues come after you for this kind of stuff. It's an opinion. You don't like it? I'm sure you've offered many opinions people don't like. And the minute somebody turns it around and comes after you, you're going to be freaking out about it. This is a huge problem for American universities. I mean, we've reached the point for American universities, you are literally being told, shut up and agree. There is no debate, there is no ability to argue or challenge, and he makes a really good point. One of the things these new wave of riots have demonstrated, that it's not enough for police officers to show up at these riots and do nothing. I mean, you imagine how emasculating that is. Why are these big city mayors, who have already made it clear, Democrat mayors, that there will be no police retaliation, there will be no police engagement? So why are you, if you're telling basically the city of Minneapolis, the mayor believes it's okay to burn the city down because of George Floyd. Yep. Why send the cops? To tell the cops to stay home. Wouldn't the burning and looting be easier if there were no cops? But no. Why are we lining up cops? We're lining them up for a medieval sentence of communal shaming. These are cops fully armed with their tasers and their truncheons and their guns, and they're being spit on and screamed at, but they're not allowed to do anything. You've got these cops who are able and willing to stop this, but you, the mayor of places like Minneapolis, you have neutered them. They're the most heavily armed neuters, eunuchs in the history of the world. They've got to stand there and take it. And the chemistry professor's right. Used to be, if you approach one of those cops with something that looks like a dangerous object in your hand and invade their state, they would push you away and arrest you. Now what you're telling them, all these protesters trying to get the chemistry professor fired, what you're telling them is, anything I want to do to a cop, I can do. And the minute you defend those cops, you're worse than the cops themselves. This, my friends, is fascism.
And on the same note, we have Professor William Jacobson, who's a Cornell law professor, and he runs a blog called Legal Insurrection. And so he's been now publicly censured by his law school dean following criticism with the whole BLM movement. And there's actually another email campaign lobbying to get him fired as well. So he's a racist, they're saying, and the Black Law Students Association at Cornell called to boycott all of his classes, and that this shouldn't, basically he's the only openly conservative law professor at Cornell, so let's definitely not take him and possibly hear anything different.
That same professor, ex-professor, who conspired to get a lesbian candidate drummed out of the job because she dared to mention unironically hoodies. She is routinely approaching the current department head, I've heard from multiple sources as well, and saying, we've got to get rid of Duke now. In this climate,
mug that says that.
In this climate, when we're becoming much more activist, this is our chance to get rid of him.
It's our opportunity.
It's our opportunity, and that's what's happening to the
law professor,
the conservative law professor.
The chemistry professor.
His crime is being conservative, and he had a target on his back before he ever used Twitter.
Yeah, he actually wrote a couple posts. And just reminding people about a different incident back, remember the Michael Brown case? The hands up, don't shoot?
Which turned out to be false.
Yep, and again, he's a law professor, so he was breaking down the points, and the whole narrative was fabricated, and yet that's causing him to be fired because he's just pointing out the truth, because the truth will not set you free. It's time now for some real education. Macbeth is one of Shakespeare's 4 great tragedies in company with Hamlet, Othello, and my favorite, King Lear. First performed in 1606 to celebrate the ascension to the English throne of King James VI of Scotland, who became King James I of England. The play includes characters who were James's Scottish ancestors. It also revolves in part around 3 witches, creatures who so fascinated James that he wrote a massive volume about them entitled Demonology. The play also features one of the great, if not the greatest, evil female characters in all of literature, Lady Macbeth.
So Macbeth is one of my favorite plays. Love to teach it. And Lady Macbeth is a masterpiece. She really is. But she's a masterpiece of evil. And I want to focus very closely on one short passage. Mike, show the passage, please. She is actually going to pray to the devil, offer a prayer to a devil, so that she will have her sex taken from her. very modern in its connotations. She is praying to the devil that the devil take away her feminine characteristics. Why? Because she wants to be masculine and men kill things. She wants to kill Duncan the king, and so she wants to become more male. Number one, you have a feminist character here who believes that all masculinity is toxic, and you have a woman who actually believes that you can, just by waving your hand, become a man. Sound familiar? Here's their prayer. But notice, for all her moral relevancy, she won't observe God's biology, right? Male and female. She has to pray to the devil to have a chance at degendering herself. You understand why this is a fun play to teach in the modern classroom. She prays, "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breasts, and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife sees not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold." Now here's a woman who knows what she's doing is evil. She knows trying to change her gender is evil. Notice, in order to become the man that she thinks she wants to become, she has to reject maternity, right? Come to these mother's breasts. And a little bit later in the play, she says, "I know what it is to give suck. I know what it is to breastfeed a child. If I had sworn as you had, husband, to kill Duncan, I would have plucked from my nipple the baby's boneless, teethless gums and dashed its brains out." The destruction of children. What does feminism and gender confusion lead to, according to Shakespeare? Demonism, biological denial, anti-God, anti-motherhood, and the destruction of children. 400 years ago, Shakespeare warned you what would come of godless leftist movements, and there it is.
Good old Billy. All right, as always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Now, as a reminder, Freedom Project Academy's live online school is enrolling new students for the upcoming school year, but that enrollment ends soon. So request your free packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com. Now, today, we're going to wrap things up with our usual fun fact of the day. Since we talked about cops using the bathroom, the flushing toilet was invented by John Harrington in 1596, which is where we get the nickname, the John. And we also call the toilet the Crapper because of Thomas Crapper, who invented the U-bend.
And that's going to do it for this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, practice good bathroom hygiene, my friends.